Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this news hour on Equinoxe Television, broadcasting from Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. I am Bable Jonathan. In our top stories in this edition of the news, a professor of political science and international relations criticizes Cameroon government's management of the disturbing humanitarian situation in the country provoked by the security crisis in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, in the far north and also in the east region, with the Boko Haram and Seleka rebel security challenges respectively in the far north and in the east region of the Republic of Cameroon. He thinks that the Cameroon government has done nothing specifically as far as refugees of the Anglophone crisis in neighboring Nigeria concern. Also in this newscast, we'll talk about poor, inadequate electric energy supply in the town of Kumba, Meme Division, southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon. This has come to further complicate living conditions for inhabitants already deeply and badly affected by the Anglophone crisis that has been pulling on for close to 5 years today. Observers continue raising concerns over the humanitarian crisis in the Republic of Cameroon, a crisis provoked by security problems in the northwest, southwest, far north and east regions of the Republic of Cameroon. In the northwest region of the country for close to 5 years today, as it is the case in the southwest region, there has been an ongoing security crisis that has provoked a serious humanitarian situation in those two regions and other parts of the country, with IDPs who have moved out of those regions, internally displaced persons who are now seeking refuge in deplorable conditions for many of them in different parts of the country, and a crisis also provoked by the Boko Haram security challenges in the far north region and the Seleka rebels who are making sporadic incursions into the east region of the country. And according to the Canadian High Commission, at least 4.4 million people are now in need of humanitarian assistance in the country. Take a listen to the analysis of Dr. Ita Ewane, professor of political science and international relations at the Karlshochschule International University in Germany.
Situation, it's quite disturbing, and Mr. Babila, I would just like to remind you that in conflict, the bullet kills just a few people. The most dangerous part of it is the resultant humanitarian crisis that even comes at the end of the conflict, and Cameroon is already experiencing that. You have a huge influx of Cameroonians into Nigeria. I was recently watching a video of the visit of Dr. Christopher Fomunyo to the Cameroonian refugees in Nigeria, and you could see little children without any future, no education because they can't even go to school. You could see how some of our little girls have been induced and pushed into prostitution because they need to survive. You could see parents who have been reduced to beggars, people who had a means of livelihood at home, people who had homes. They had a means to survive. So you find this is happening in Cameroon. In internally displaced people, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of Cameroonians walk in the streets of Douala in Bonaberi, around the motor park. You can see how our people have been reduced to destitute in their own country. You look at the situation in the far north with the increasing number of Cameroonian refugees, Cameroonians fleeing into Nigeria, Nigerians fleeing into Cameroon. Now, people without any hope, no means of feeding themselves.
Taiwan, a professor of political science and international relations at the Karlshochschule International University in Germany, speaking to the Inside, also highlighted flaws in government's management of the humanitarian crisis and indicated that this is a crisis that is coming as a result or has been provoked by the poor management of the situation, notably in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. Take a listen to him.
Has not done anything. The government has not visited the Cameroonian refugees in Nigeria, to the best of my knowledge, because we have the opportunity to talk to some of these refugees. We've had friends who visited these refugees. We belong to organizations that have been bringing assistance to some of the refugees, both at home and abroad. So what has the government been doing? Do you know of any center in the Northwest and Southwest where the government is providing assistance to the displaced, the internally displaced people? Do you know of any center in Yaoundé, Douala, where the government is providing assistance to the internally displaced people? This government has not been doing anything. The few things we've seen is a few administrators who parade around with 4 or 5 bags of rice and distribute to people who sometimes are not even refugees. Even the young fighters, some of the young men who voluntarily left the bushes and joined the DDR centers, what have we seen? We see them constantly in the streets because the government has not been able to keep its words. The government has not been able to meet the promises that were made to these young men. You talked about a certain minister of territorial administration. We saw him parading with mattresses. You're giving mattresses to people living in the streets. Where do they place the mattresses to sleep on? Those people did not leave their homes because they wanted to. These people have only one worry at this moment. They want to return to their homes. And the government came up with a plan, a reconstruction plan. It's over a year and no single village has been reconstructed.
Inadequate electric energy supply, a major problem in the town of Kumba, Meme Division, southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, and this is one of the consequences of the Anglophone crisis and constant power outage and low voltage electricity supply caused by the phase supply from Limbe has affected fresh fish retailers and sellers or business persons, traders of perishable products in the Kumba main market, and this has caused the increase in price of fish in the town of Kumba due to the use of generators, or due to the fact that those who are selling fish are now using generators, and this is increasing cost and thus the increase in the prices. And of course there are indications that Kumba had electricity from Limbe, and of course this is information streaming into a newsroom from our correspondent in Limbe, Zaiboy, that Kumba had electricity from Limbe and Lum in the Mongo division, but due to the Anglophone crisis the supply of electricity from Lum was destroyed, and to further worsen the situation, the power supply from Limbe has been inadequate, and traders and other city dwellers are suffering the consequences of this problem in the town of Kumba. Now take a listen to some of the inhabitants.
I'm also appealing to my colleagues for the Tinga field to be honest, because inside the field, the key of the field is the honesty. At times we face difficulties like voltage, you give the advice to the customer that it's low voltage than to condemn the fridge or to say this is bad, which is low voltage, because most of the customers, they are ignorant, they are novice. So we are the technician, we are the ones to educate them, to well educate them, to assure them that the voltage is a problem, but the apparatus is good, but the current is low, which it cannot carry, so they should not be afraid. When the current is low, they should put off the appliances, like towards evening like this, they put off the appliances. By late night, they put them on back so that it can carry.
Which we have to spend more. We have to put in fuel. The expenses become too much when there's no light. And then, like, maybe when the generator goes bad, we have to lose a lot in the fish. Most of them go bad.
Albert Nzongang, one of the allies of the national president of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, CRM political party, one of his special advisors, explains the controversies surrounding the Cameroon survival initiative and dismisses allegations of mismanagement and embezzlement of money contributed by Cameroonians to help in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic in the country. According to him, everything was done in total transparency, and no franc of the money contributed by Cameroonians has been stolen by whosoever. But however, he says that there are still some information on how the funds were used in details expected by the national president of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, Professor Maurice Kamto, from the manager, from the one who was spearheading that initiative, Christian Pendekoka, who is one of his allies, and talking about allegations of corruption, mismanagement, and embezzlement of money given to Cameroon by the International Monetary Fund in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. He says that the government has stolen much of the money. Government officials have embezzled much of the money, and he was speaking to La Vérité en Face on Sunday. Take a listen.
It was realized that money went missing, or there was some mismanagement at the level of the Ministry of Public Health, for example.
Yes. It
is not certain if the money was mismanaged, for example, by Manahuda Malashi or the close aides, like the minister who died, Ali Mayato. It could also be argued that the process is still ongoing to be able to identify those directly responsible. You remember that when you were talking about the case of the SCSI, you were saying that you are hoping that Christian Pendakuka is still preparing something to come. It could be that at the level of the government in Yaoundé, it's still a process on course.
No, if it was the first time, but they used to make it, they used to say, okay, we know about that, but we have the time for us, and we only know when we can put.
So you think that nothing will happen?
Nothing will happen, because they are all thieves. If one is to go to prison, all have to go to prison. Everyone have an one time or 2 time thief something, and his neighbor know. Everyone know what his neighbor have done, and he say something about me, and we will say what I will say about you.
That was Professor Albert Zongang, rather one of the allies of Professor Maurice Kamto, national president of the CRM political party, speaking to La Vérité en Face on Equinoxe Television. Now back to the security and socio-political challenges in the northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon. A political scientist and former member of government, Professor Elvis Ngole, condemns attempts to divide the nation and the use of explosive devices against civilians or individuals, government forces in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, and says all of that amount to crimes against humanity in international law. Listen to him.
Makes secession worse is that those who carry secession out engage in gruesome, barbaric methods of using weapons of mass destruction, bombs, be they artisanal or fabricated in industry. The use of bombs, the use of artisanal bombs to kill people amounts to an act of mass destruction. And that is, as far as I know, as a senior lecturer of international relations, an associate professor that I am, that is an act which is against international law, it's against human rights, it is against humanitarian law, and it's against the decency and the humanity of people. And those who are engaging in these sort of acts of using bombs or artisanal bombs or whatever bombs expose themselves to being prosecuted for crimes against humanity, because the use of bombs to kill people in mass, innocent people for that matter, civilians and non-civilians, is considered in international law as an act against humanity.
Minister of Public Health, Dr. Manauda Malachi, highlights growing concerns over the devastating consequences of hypertension on Cameroonians. And speaking within the framework of the World Hypertension Day, the Minister of Public Health said that at least 1 out of 3 Cameroonians are affected by this health problem. And of course, in the report coming up next, Immaculate Fogwe takes a look at the manifestation and the causes, of course, of hypertension.
1 out of 3 Cameroonians are hypertensive. According to the Cameroon Cardiac Society, more than 35% of the population are hypertensive, with 19,000 deaths registered each year. The number of deaths is even more alarming due to the fact that many persons are unaware of their status. Cardiologists are extremely worried because out of 5 persons who are hypertensive, 40% of them are not even aware. This is because it is a silent killer. Before, hypertension used to be known as a disease that affects just older people, but high blood pressure actually affects people of all ages, including young children. So, why is high blood pressure in children a growing problem? Some children who are less than 15 years old smoke cigarettes. A lot of persons do not carry out physical exercise. They prefer sitting in their vehicles the whole day. Our diet is another problem. A lot of people eat a lot of salt and junk food. Apart from poor lifestyles, stress and inheritance pattern can equally cause hypertension. In order to reduce the rising mortality rates, health experts encourage the entire population to go for checkup on regular basis. For those who have been diagnosed with hypertension, they should take their medication as prescribed by the doctor. They should equally carry out regular exercise and avoid junk food. Patients suffering with hypertension are being urged to seek treatment as fast as possible in order to avoid the resurgence of other health complications.
And the take-home message this year within the context of the World Hypertension Day is measure your blood pressure accurately, control it, live longer. And of course, we take you now out of the country, and we're going to be talking about efforts by France to strengthen its ties with African nations. This is one of the issues, or the major issue that's going to be on the table as French President Emmanuel Macron meets with African leaders on the 18th of May 2021. That's of course tomorrow, and this is one of the elements on our international news page compiled by Charles Ekome.
Is due to hold a summit for selected African heads of state to spur economic growth in light of the COVID-19 pandemic on May 18, 2021. French President Emmanuel Macron will play host to several African leaders. Amongst them are chairpersons of the African Union Commission and the head of the African Development Bank. Some European leaders, as well as representatives from the G7, G20, International Monetary Fund, and other financial institutions are also expected to attend. President Macron has sent invitations to the most significant African economies and certainly those who are part of La Francophonie. But most importantly, Macron, like his predecessors, François Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy, is trying to extend friendship ties to countries that France did not colonize, such as Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. Observers view them as the emerging countries on the African continent. In Chile, on the South American continent, independent and opposition candidates have won a key to 2/3 of the seats in the body that will vote a new constitution in the country. A new constitution to replace the one dating back to General Pinochet's military rule was a crucial demand of protests which swept through Chile in 2019. Government-backed candidates have only served about 1/4 of the seats, that is short of numbers which would have made it possible for them to block sweeping challenges. Right-wing President Sebastián Pinera said it was an election which had sent a clear message, and that his government and other traditional parties were not attuned to the demands and aspirations of the people. One of their demands is to reform the old dictatorship-era constitution, which they argued was at the root of much of Chile's inequality, by giving undue weight to Chile's private sector.
Talking Point is up next. Our guest today is a health professional, Dr. Guti Anita. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Babella. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Right, we're talking about hypertension, which is one of the very serious health problems in Cameroon. At least 1 out of 3 Cameroonians affected, according to the Minister of Public Health. What does these figures represent?
Well, first, when they say hypertension, is to the common man is what we say high blood pressure, or what they normally say BP. Yeah, and it's something that is real, like from the statistics that the Minister of Public Health is giving. And the fearful thing is that the 1 in 3 is the real thing that is on ground, but most of those people who have high blood pressure don't even know that they have high blood pressure. So it's something that is very disturbing, and it's something that is growing, and it's fearful, as I would say. And
it is the main risk factor for cardiovascular diseases, especially diseases like stroke and heart attack and other cardiovascular diseases. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, hypertension is the leading risk factor for cardiovascular diseases, as you rightly said, like stroke, coronary artery diseases, like diseases of the heart failure, and those are one of the leading causes of death worldwide. So the main risk factor to develop a stroke, the main risk factor to develop heart failure, which is very difficult to treat and control, is hypertension.
High blood pressure. Now, tell us, this health problem, what are the causes? High blood pressure,
okay,
in particular.
Well, hypertension, the main cause usually in the elderly, there is no particular cause, but we have risk factors. Like the risk factor to develop hypertension, you have from the race. Black people are more at risk now. We have males are more at risk, female when they are in menopause, and then people older than 40 years. But as we are getting the statistics now, younger people also are getting hypertension. So it's no longer only a disease of the old, but it's shifting now to be a disease even of every age group, due to the many risk factors that they are exposed to. Alcoholism, which is one of the major things that Cameroonians are known by, with their alcohol, and that's one of the major risk factors for hypertension. And smoking, obesity, those are the risk factors. So those things put you at higher risk of having hypertension. And usually if you go even for the management of hypertension, you will see how all of those things play a part now in the management of hypertension.
And the burden of hypertension is felt disproportionately in low and middle income countries, including Cameroon, of course, where 2/3 of cases are found, largely due to increased risk factors in those populations in recent decades. What explains that disproportionate manifestation of hypertension in low and middle income countries?
Babila, before hypertension was a disease of white people. Our ancestors, they didn't have this problem. But now the reason why we are facing this problem is because of the shift in lifestyle. The lifestyle, people's lifestyle have started resembling that of the Western world. People are sedentary, there's less activity. You want to go, somebody is maybe at Carrefour Ajib, wants to go to Mbopi market, takes a bike to go, a walking distance. All those things has shifted the burden of hypertension and brought it to the low and middle income countries. Now, in these low and middle income countries, we already first of all had our problems. We had tuberculosis to deal with, we had HIV, we had malaria to deal with, which we are still struggling. Now hypertension coming at this very high, with these very high levels coming to add upon that, with our health system is becoming now a higher burden. That's why there is a shift. You see the burden is there. It's not as if the levels, the number of people with hypertension in low and middle income countries is more than in the Western world, but it's just that the burden, how to handle it, to deal with it, is more burdensome for us.
All right. Now, you talked about a change in lifestyle. What about a change in eating habit?
Exactly.
Eating habit.
Yeah, it's like the doctor was saying during the news, junk food. There is this dietary approach to stop hypertension. There's actually a diet plan to stop hypertension. So if you look at that dietary approach, you see that our diet here is shifting. It's not in line. Like you see the amount of oil we use to cook food, the amount of salt we use, the junk food, all of those junk food, the amount of salt they contain, the sugar, the overweight, how we get all those things, they are all contributing to this problem that we're facing.
Tell us a little more about this junk food. When you talk about junk food, you know, it may not be well understood in the sense that there is a general idea that when you have enough oil in your food, then that food is good. When you have when it's really salty, tasteful in the mouth, in terms of salt and Maggi and all those things, it's really good. It is good food. And then you can go further to add maybe a bottle of 33 export. This is good living, this is good eating.
Exactly. So that's the impression that we get. And the problem is that the food that is even good for us is very expensive in the market. Like having a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits, a lot of whole grains like granite, sweet potatoes, all those food that we used to have in those days. Those are the kind of food that is good. When we talk about junk food, we talk of these fried chips, cakes, bread. It's not as if we cannot eat any of those things, but there is a quantity that we can eat that is good for us. There is a quantity of oil, there's a quantity of salt. It's not like we should live like people who
there should be some control.
Yeah, there should be some control.
And there is also, apart from salt and oil, I mean fatty foods and
exactly.
There is also sugar. Is sugar also an issue for Christians who are always drinking juice all the time, sweet and so on? Is it also a problem?
It's actually also a problem, but it's not as if sugar is directly linked to hypertension, but there is a link. Because when you take a lot of sugary food or sugary drinks, it leads to central obesity, can lead to hypertension, to diabetes. And diabetes, we usually tell patients that diabetes and hypertension are cousins. They work together. Once you see one, you look for the other one.
All right. Whatever the case, the watchword is control. You
Yes.
to control the quantity of everything that you eat.
Yeah.
All right. Now, talking about this, the treatment. Talking about the treatment of hypertension, it seems to be quite costly in Cameroon.
Yeah, it is costly when it gets to a point when it's poorly controlled. But now, early diagnosis, because if you have your blood pressure, if you are diagnosed of hypertension at the early stage, Usually even dietary modification, reduction in alcohol, physical exercise, those ones can go a long way to reduce your blood pressure even to normal level. Like for example, reducing your weight by just 10 kilograms can reduce your blood pressure by 20. So just those lifestyle modification can bring down your blood pressure. But if it is poorly controlled, you might now go to maybe having to take one drug, and then you still don't control it properly. You go to taking 2 drugs and 3 drugs, and that's how the expenses are going higher and higher.
And you be living on drugs the whole of your life, is that?
That's what's important. Once you have hypertension, you have hypertension. If the blood pressure is well controlled, it means that the medication you are taking is controlling it. If you stop the medication, the blood pressure will go back up. So it's not as if it's something that will stop someday. You can get to a point where it will be well controlled, and we might even reduce the medication to the barest minimum. But it doesn't mean that will stop you. You should stop your medications because your blood pressure is no longer high or something like that.
Except a miracle takes that out of your body. For those who believe in God, for those who believe in miracles.
Yeah.
And of course now, about half, according to statistics from the World Health Organization, about half of those living with hypertension are unaware of their condition, putting them at risk of avoidable medical complications. What explains the fact that many living with hypertension are not aware about it? Is it just because they didn't go for tests, or there's no symptom, there are no manifestations?
Usually, hypertension is what we call one of the silent killers. It's not like malaria, that once you have malaria, you start having fever, headache, and it will show you that there is something wrong. You can stay with your blood pressure, and the first symptom that you have is already a complication. That is why the emphasis is on control. It's like for you to take the initiative to go and check your blood pressure, and to check it accurately. Check it where the blood pressure will be taken accurately. Because if
I was coming to that, because the theme of this year's edition of the World Hypertension Day says that control or do your blood pressure. Is that? No, let me read it. Let me read it out. Measure your blood pressure accurately.
Exactly.
Control it. Live longer. Measure accurately. Why the emphasis on accurately?
That is very important, because to take your blood pressure, on first sight, it might seem so easy to do, but there are so many things to consider. Before taking your blood pressure, you have to rest for at least 20 minutes. You have to sit properly. Your legs are not crossed. Your hand should be at the level of your heart. The blood pressure cuff should be appropriate for your hand. Like if you're small, we use a bigger cuff on you, it will give a wrong value. If you're big, we use a smaller cuff on you, it will give a wrong value. So there are many steps that have to be put in place to take your blood pressure accurately.
And the first thing, that's of course the first thing, to measure your blood pressure, to know if you are exposed to that or not. And then when you actually tested, let me say positive, when you discover that you have hypertension, the next thing is to control. And controlling it, you mentioned diet, and there are also drugs that you will need to take. Now, about the diet, what are the prescriptions, what are the medical prescriptions about diet in order to be able to control the level of your blood pressure?
Okay, so for the diet, as I said before, we have this DASH diet, the dietary approach to stop hypertension. This diet encourages using more of fruits, eating more fruits and vegetables. But there is a quantity of maybe cereals or things like rice or bread in very limited quantity. Yes, so even milk, yogurt is better